The grand ballroom of Aldercrest Manor blazed with the light of 10,000 candles, their flames reflected in crystal chandeliers that hung like frozen waterfalls from the vaulted ceiling. Gold leaf shimmered on every surface, and hothouse flowers perfumed the air with suffocating sweetness. Jessamine Thorne noticed none of it. She was too busy kneeling on cold marble, her needle flying through silk as she repaired a torn hem for the third time that evening. Lady Honoria Blackwood stood above her, tapping one slippered foot with impatience. "Hurry up, girl. The Duke hasn't danced with anyone yet." "Almost finished, my lady." Jessamine kept her voice neutral, her eyes on her work. 23 years of life had taught her the value of invisibility, and 4 years as a seamstress at Madame Orsolia's dress shop had perfected the skill. She tied off the thread and rose, stepping back into the shadows of the service alcove where she belonged. Lady Honoria swept away without acknowledgement, golden curls bouncing. From her hidden position behind a marble column, Jessamine could observe the entire ballroom while remaining unseen. It was a useful position for watching the peculiar theater unfolding before her. The Duke of Aldercrest stood at the far end of the room, surrounded by eager young ladies and their even more eager mothers. Even from this distance, Jessamine could appreciate why they flocked to him. Theron Ashford was tall and lean, with hair the color of burnished oak and features that seemed carved from aristocratic marble. He was also, she observed, utterly miserable. Oh, he hid it well beneath that mask of courtesy. But Jessamine had spent years reading people from the margins, and she recognized the tension in his shoulders, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes, the subtle flinch each time another simpering debutante was presented to him. This ball was not his choice. Someone had forced his hand. That someone, Jessamine suspected, was the silver-haired woman holding court near the refreshment tables. The Dowager Duchess Araminta Ashford wore her 70 years like a crown, her spine straight as a sword, her sharp eyes missing nothing. A grandmother desperate for her grandson to marry. A grandson clearly resistant to the idea. And between them, a ballroom full of hopeful ladies competing for a prize that didn't seem to want to be won. The clock on the mantel showed 9:30, still 2.5 hours until midnight. That was the other peculiarity of this evening. The Dowager Duchess had announced at the start of the ball that her grandson would select his future bride at the stroke of midnight. Any lady wishing to be considered must remain until then. Those who departed early would be removing themselves from contention. A commotion near the dance floor drew Jessamine's attention. Lady Perpetua. Vance, a statuesque redhead in emerald silk, was storming toward the exit with her mother hurrying behind. "The audacity," Lady Perpetua hissed as she passed Jessamine's alcove. "He actually suggested my conversation was putting him to sleep." To sleep? Jessamine's eyebrows rose. That was the fourth lady to leave in the past hour, each departure preceded by some cutting remark or cold dismissal from the Duke. Either Theron Ashford had the social graces of a hibernating bear, or he was deliberately driving them away. She suspected the latter. By 11 o'clock, where once 50 hopeful ladies had filled the ballroom, perhaps 20 remained. The Duke had insulted Lady Marguerite's intelligence, yawned through Lady Cecily's description of her charitable works, and asked Lady Honoria if she had any interests beyond her own reflection. At 11:30, Jessamine was summoned to repair a wine stain on Lady Beatrice Chelmsworth's sleeve. The work required privacy, so she led the lady to a small antechamber off the main ballroom. 3 more just left, Lady Beatrice reported, while Jessamine worked. Lady Sophronia actually threw her champagne at him before departing. Can you imagine? 20 minutes until midnight. Jessamine focused on her work, gently lifting the wine stain from the delicate fabric. But Lady Beatrice had other ideas. Actually, she said slowly, examining the remaining guests through the antechamber's doorway. "I've just realized I have absolutely no interest in marrying a man who deliberately humiliates women for sport. Keep the sleeve. I'm leaving." She unpinned the sleeve entirely, handed it to Jessamine, and strode out with her head high and one arm bare. Jessamine moved to follow, but the antechamber door had swung shut behind Lady Beatrice, and it wouldn't open. She tried the handle again. The mechanism was jammed, the old brass catch refusing to release. One door. No windows large enough to climb through. Walls too thick to hear her if she called for help. She was trapped. The clock in the ballroom began to strike midnight. Through the heavy door, Jessamine heard the muffled chimes. 12 strikes. Then silence. Then footsteps, growing closer. The antechamber door swung open, and Jessamine found herself face to face with the Duke of Aldercrest himself. He stared at her. She stared back. "Who the devil are you?" Up close, the Duke was even more striking than he had appeared from across the ballroom. His eyes were an unusual shade of green-gray, sharp with intelligence, and currently narrowed with suspicion. His jaw was set in a hard line, and candlelight cast shadows across cheekbones that could have been sculpted by a Renaissance master. He was also clearly furious. "I asked you a question. Who are you, and why are you hiding in my antechamber?" Jessamine lifted her chin, refusing to cower despite the hammering of her heart. "I wasn't hiding, Your Grace. I was trapped. The door mechanism jammed. Trapped. How convenient. There's nothing convenient about spending 30 minutes in a closet-sized room with questionable ventilation." The words came out sharper than she intended. Before he could respond, another figure appeared in the doorway. The Dowager Duchess Araminta swept in like a ship under full sail, her expression caught somewhere between calculation and triumph. "Theron, darling, what's happening? Who is this young woman?" "That's precisely what I'm attempting to determine, grandmother." Araminta's gaze swept over Jessamine, taking in the plain gray dress, the work-worn hands, the sewing basket visible in the corner. Understanding dawned in the older woman's eyes, followed by something that looked disturbingly like inspiration. "You're from Madame Orsolia's shop, the seamstress who's been handling wardrobe repairs all evening." "Yes, Your Grace, Jessamine Thorne. And you've been here since before midnight, in this room. For the past 30 minutes, Your Grace." The Dowager Duchess smiled. It was not an entirely comforting expression. "Theron, do you know what this means? You declared publicly that you would choose your bride from among the ladies who remained in this house at midnight." She gestured toward Jessamine with a flourish. She remained. The silence that followed was profound. "Your Grace, I'm not a lady," Jessamine protested. "I'm a seamstress. I wasn't even a guest at this ball." "Details," Araminta said dismissively. "Rather significant details, I would think." The Duke's voice had gone cold. "Grandmother, surely you're not suggesting—" "I'm suggesting nothing. I'm simply pointing out facts. You made a public declaration. You trapped yourself with your own cleverness, thinking you could drive all the candidates away and escape marriage for another season." Araminta's eyes glinted. But fate, it seems, had other plans. "This isn't fate. This is a jammed door and unfortunate timing." "Is it? Or is it an opportunity?" The Dowager Duchess turned back to Jessamine, studying her with uncomfortable intensity. "What are your circumstances, Miss Thorne? Family? Prospects?" Jessamine swallowed hard. "I'm an orphan, Your Grace. I've been employed at Madame Orsolia's shop for 4 years. I have no family, no fortune, and no prospects beyond continuing my work as a seamstress." "Perfect," Araminta breathed. "Grandmother. Think about it, Theron. You've spent years rejecting every suitable candidate I've presented. Perhaps what you need isn't another perfect aristocrat. Perhaps what you need is something different entirely." She fixed Jessamine with an intense stare. "Miss Thorne, I have a proposition for you. Your Grace, I really don't think—" "You have nothing," Araminta continued, as if Jessamine hadn't spoken. "No security, no future beyond sewing, until your eyes fail and your fingers stiffen. What I'm offering is a chance at something more. Pretend to be my grandson's betrothed for 10 weeks. Play the role convincingly, and when the arrangement ends, I will give you enough money to open your own dress shop, complete financial independence, a future of your own making." The words hung in the air, glittering with impossible promise. Jessamine looked at the Duke, who stood rigid, with barely contained fury, then back at the Dowager Duchess, whose expression suggested she had already won. "Your Grace, even if I agreed, the deception would be impossible to maintain. I have no knowledge of aristocratic customs, no training in, you'll learn, tutors, wardrobe, coaching in etiquette and deportment." Araminta waved a hand, as if these were minor considerations. "Intelligence can compensate for breeding. Grandmother, this is insanity. This is practicality, Theron. You painted yourself into a corner with your midnight ultimatum. If you announce now that no one remained, that you failed to choose a bride, you'll be the laughingstock of London. Your reputation will suffer. Your standing in Parliament will suffer. Your business dealings will suffer." The Duke's jaw tightened further. "And your alternative is to announce that I'm betrothed to a seamstress?" "My alternative is to announce that you're betrothed to a young woman of mysterious background, who captured your heart with her quiet dignity and keen mind. Society will be enchanted. Society will be suspicious. Society will be fascinated. There's a difference." Jessamine's mind raced. This was madness. She would be exposed within days, humiliated, possibly worse. But her fingers already showed strain from years of detailed work. She slept in a tiny room above the shop and ate whatever Madame Orsolia provided, which was never quite enough. She had no savings, no prospects, and no path forward, except more of the same until she broke down entirely. "If I agree," she heard herself say, "I want the terms in writing, legal documentation, and I want a portion of the payment in advance as a sign of good faith." Araminta's smile widened. "I knew you were intelligent." "Done." "I haven't agreed to any of this," the Duke interjected. "You don't need to agree, darling. You need to cooperate. There's a meaningful distinction." His grandmother patted his arm. "Miss Thorne will be staying here tonight. Tomorrow, we begin her transformation. The announcement will go out in the morning papers." "Grandmother." "The morning papers, Theron." Araminta swept toward the door. "Oh, and do try to look at her without scowling. If you're going to pretend to be in love, you should probably practice." She departed, leaving Jessamine alone with the furious Duke of Aldercrest. The silence stretched between them. "Well," Jessamine said finally, "I suppose we should probably talk." Morning arrived with disorienting abruptness. Jessamine woke in a bed larger than her entire room above Madame Orsolia's shop, drowning in silk sheets that probably cost more than her yearly wages. For a long moment, she lay still, staring at an ornate ceiling painted with cherubs and clouds, trying to convince herself that the previous night had actually happened. It had. She was truly here, in the Duke of Aldercrest's home, pretending to be his future wife. A maid arrived with a breakfast tray and instructions. His Grace requested her presence in the study at 9, Her Grace at 10. Jessamine ate quickly, dressed in yesterday's plain gray gown, and found her way through labyrinthine corridors to the Duke's study. The room was a temple of masculine order. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, walls lined with books that actually looked read rather than decorative. Theron Ashford stood by the window, silhouetted against morning light. "Miss Thorne, please, sit." She chose a chair facing the desk, watching as he positioned himself behind it. The arrangement was deliberate, establishing dominance, putting furniture between them like a barricade. "Before you begin," she said, cutting off whatever speech he had prepared, "I want you to know that I didn't ask for this situation. I was doing my job, got trapped by a faulty door, and then your grandmother decided I was the solution to a problem I didn't know existed. If you want someone to be angry at, look to your own family." Surprise crossed his features. "You're very direct. I find it saves time. Something tells me neither of us wants to drag this out longer than necessary." "Fair point." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "My grandmother believes you can be trained to pass as a lady of quality. I have my doubts." "As do I. But your grandmother seems quite determined, and I suspect arguing with her is rather like arguing with the tide." A hint of amusement crossed his face before he suppressed it. "An accurate assessment." He paused. "I'm not actually cruel, Miss Thorne. Merely frustrated at being forced into things. My father died when I was 12. My mother followed a year later. I've been the Duke of Aldercrest since I was barely old enough to shave, with my grandmother steering until I came of age. And now, when I should finally be free to make my own choices, I find myself still being maneuvered." The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. "I understand frustration," she said quietly. "I've spent my entire life being told what I could and couldn't do, what I could and couldn't aspire to. The difference is, your cage is made of gold. Mine was made of much cheaper materials." He turned to look at her, really look at her, for perhaps the first time. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone who would simper and fawn, grateful for the opportunity to play at being a duchess." "Would you prefer simpering? I can probably manage it if necessary." "God, no. The simpering would drive me mad within a day." He moved to sit on the desk's edge, reducing the distance between them. "Very well, Miss Thorne. It appears we're stuck in this farce together. We should establish some ground rules." "I'm listening." "First, complete honesty between us. Whatever lies we tell the outside world, I want truth within these walls. If something isn't working, say so. Agreed? And in return? I will treat you with respect. You're a business partner of sorts. We have a shared goal. Survive the next 10 weeks without scandal, then part ways amicably. A business partnership. I can work with that. Second, we need to coordinate our stories. My grandmother has already sent the announcement to the papers." He held up a hand at her look of alarm. "Yes, already. The story is that you're the daughter of a minor gentry family that fell on hard times. We met at a charity event, where you impressed me with your intelligence. Almost believable. It needs to be more than almost. You'll need to learn everything. Who's who in society, proper address, which fork to use at dinner. I'd learn quickly. You'll need to." He stood, moving to pull a bell cord by the fireplace. "One more thing. I spent last night deliberately driving away every eligible woman in that ballroom. Do you know why? Because you didn't want to marry any of them. Because I didn't want to marry a performance. They were all pretending to be interested in my thoughts, pretending to find me charming, pretending to be something they weren't because they wanted my title and fortune." His tone turned pointed. "You're pretending too, but at least you're honest about it being a transaction. That's considerably more refreshing. For what it's worth, Your Grace, you might have found genuinely compatible women among those candidates if you'd given them a chance. It's difficult to be authentic when you're being evaluated like livestock at market. Perhaps. We'll never know now, will we?" She left him standing by the window, a duke trapped by duty and circumstance, just as surely as she had been trapped by that jammed door. They were both prisoners, just of very different kinds of cells. The Pemberton afternoon tea was precisely the sort of event Jessamine had spent her entire life observing from the margins. Now she was expected to walk into its center and pretend she belonged there. She stood in the entrance hall of Aldercrest Manor, dressed in a gown of soft rose silk that had been completed just hours ago by a team of seamstresses working through the night. Her hair had been styled elaborately, and she wore borrowed pearls at her throat. She looked, she had to admit, almost like a lady. Theron descended the stairs in afternoon dress. He paused when he saw her. "You look lovely," he said. "The gown suits you." "Better delivery than appropriate. I'm impressed." "I'm learning." In the carriage, his manner shifted to businesslike. "The Pembertons are old family friends. Lady Pemberton was close to my mother, so she'll watch you carefully. Her son Hadrian is a known gossip who disguises his information gathering as friendly conversation. Anyone else I should worry about?" "Lady Morrigan Stanhope will be there. She's been pushing her daughter Venetia toward me for years, and will view you as an obstacle to be removed. How should I handle her?" "Politely, but firmly. Don't let her intimidate you, but don't engage in open conflict." Theron paused. "Stay close to me. I'll intervene if things become hostile." The Pemberton residence was a stately townhouse filled with the scent of flowers and the murmur of cultured voices. Jessamine felt dozens of eyes turn toward them as they entered. She squared her shoulders and walked forward, as if she had every right to be there. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in survival. Lady Pemberton greeted her warmly enough, though her sharp eyes missed nothing. Sweet-natured Isadora Pemberton seemed genuinely delighted to discuss wedding plans. Hadrian circled with probing questions, which Jessamine deflected with rehearsed vagueness. Then Lady Morrigan Stanhope materialized at her elbow during a moment when Theron had been drawn into conversation across the room. "Miss Thorne, how fascinating to finally meet you. Tell me, where did you say your family was from? I don't recognize the Thorne name." "A small estate in the north. My father preferred quiet country life to London society." "How convenient." Lady Stanhope's smile didn't reach her eyes. It must have been quite an adjustment, coming from such obscurity. Some might say an impossibly dramatic adjustment. Before Jessamine could respond, Theron appeared at her side. His hand settled at the small of her back, a gesture of possession that sent unexpected warmth through her. "Lady Stanhope, isn't Miss Thorne remarkable? Quite remarkable. Most unexpected. The best things often are." His tone carried an unmistakable warning. "If you'll excuse us." He steered her away smoothly. "Thank you," Jessamine murmured. "She's a shark. I shouldn't have left you alone." "I was handling it. You were drowning gracefully. There's a difference." They spent the remainder of the tea as a united front, and Jessamine found herself relaxing into the rhythm of partnership. By the time they departed, several people had commented on how well-suited they appeared. In the carriage ride home, the silence between them was different, more comfortable. "You did well," Theron said finally. "Better than I expected. Your expectations seem perpetually low. They're realistic. You've had 5 days against a lifetime of aristocratic conditioning." His expression grew serious. "Lady Stanhope won't stop. She's convinced something is wrong about our story. Meaning, we need to be convincing at all times. Servants talk. Guests observe everything." He turned to look at her, "Which means spending more time together. Learning each other's habits, preferences, the small details genuine couples know." "That sounds dangerously like actual friendship. Would that be so terrible?" She considered the question. This man had been her reluctant partner for less than a week, yet she already appreciated his dry wit, respected his intelligence. "No," she admitted. "I suppose it wouldn't be." 6 weeks passed with surprising swiftness. Jessamine found herself settling into life at Aldercrest Manor in ways she hadn't anticipated. The initial terror of each social engagement had faded into manageable anxiety, then into something approaching competence. More surprisingly, she had learned Theron. He took his coffee black and strong first thing in the morning, and was incapable of civil conversation until he'd finished at least one cup. He read voraciously, philosophy, political theory, even the occasional novel, though he pretended to disdain fiction. He fenced 3 mornings a week with dedication, and he despised dancing despite being frustratingly skilled at it. He was also, beneath the reserve, unexpectedly kind. They had developed routines, breakfast together discussing the day's papers, afternoons apart, Theron managing a state business or attending Parliament, Jessamine continuing her education. Evenings either at social engagements or in the library, reading in companionable silence. The library had become her sanctuary. Tonight, she sat in what had become her chair near the fire, while Theron occupied his across from her. "You're frowning," he observed without looking up. "How can you tell? You're not even watching me. You make a specific sound when you frown, a slight intake of breath, very disapproving. I do not. You absolutely do." Now he looked up. "What's troubling you?" She hesitated, then decided honesty was simpler. "I received a letter from Madame Orsolya today. She's struggling without me. 2 of her seamstresses left for better positions. Do you want to help her?" "I can't. I'm supposed to be a lady now." Theron was quiet for a moment. Then, "What if you helped her anonymously? Financial assistance, sent through a solicitor, and perhaps a recommendation to my grandmother's social circle. You would do that? It's not particularly difficult. A few words in the right ears, a modest sum." He shrugged as if saving her mentor's business was nothing. "You clearly care about her." Something stirred in Jessamine's chest, a tender ache that had nothing to do with the fire. "Thank you," she said softly. "It's nothing. It isn't nothing. Not to me." Their eyes met, and the moment stretched, charged with something she didn't want to examine too closely. Araminta's voice broke the spell. How domestic. They both turned to find the Dowager Duchess in the doorway, her expression knowing. "Everyone is talking about you," Araminta announced, settling herself on the settee. "Lady Ashworth told me yesterday that she's never seen Theron so attentive to anyone. She used the word besotted. Lady Ashworth exaggerates." "Does she? I've been watching you 2 for weeks. The way you move together at parties, finish each other's sentences, the way Theron actually smiles when you enter a room. Real smiles, not that awful grimace he used to produce." "We're playing our roles," Jessamine said, but even to her own ears, the words sounded hollow. "Are you? How fascinating." Araminta rose. "Just remember, the best performances eventually become reality. Try not to be too surprised when it happens." She departed, leaving silence in her wake. "She's wrong," Jessamine said quickly. We're just, "I know." Theron's voice was deliberately even. "We're pretending. That's the arrangement." But as they returned to their books, Jessamine couldn't focus on the words. Her mind kept drifting to the look in Theron's eyes when he'd offered to help Madame Orsolya. This was dangerous territory. In 4 weeks, the engagement would end. She would take her money, open her shop, and return to her real life. Falling in love with Theron Ashford was not part of the plan. She absolutely could not allow that to happen. The Harrington Ball was the event of the season. 500 guests, a 40-piece orchestra, and enough candles to illuminate a small city. Jessamine stood at the edge of the ballroom in a gown of midnight blue silk, trying to ignore the growing unease in her chest. 6 weeks gone. 4 remaining. The end felt both impossibly distant and terrifyingly close. Theron appeared beside her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. You look like you're contemplating escape." "I'm contemplating survival. There's a difference." He handed her a glass. "You've survived everything thus far. Even Lady Stanhope has stopped actively trying to expose you." "We should dance," he said. "People are watching." "You hate dancing." "I hate dancing with people who bore me. That's different." He extended his hand. "Dance with me." The orchestra played a waltz. His hand at her waist was warm through the silk, and when she looked up, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "Dangerous things. Such as, how different my life has become since you arrived, how much I value our evenings in the library, how I find myself looking forward to breakfast simply because you'll be there. They're on. I know this wasn't the plan. I know we agreed this was temporary." His voice dropped lower. "But I've stopped being able to pretend, Jessamine. At some point in the last 6 weeks, I stopped acting." The words hung between them, impossibly dangerous. "We can't," she whispered. "This was never supposed to be real." "What if I want it to be real? I'm a seamstress. I have nothing, no family, no fortune, no standing. If you marry me, actually marry me, society will never accept it. Do you think I care about society's acceptance? You should. You're a duke. You have responsibilities. My responsibility is to the estate and its people. My obligation is to produce an heir. None of that requires marrying someone society approves of." His hand tightened at her waist. "What it requires is marrying someone I can build a genuine life with. Someone intelligent and resilient and kind. Someone who sees me as more than just a title. Someone like me. Exactly like you." The waltz was ending. Jessamine felt tears pricking behind her eyes. "I need time," she said. "I can't. I don't know what's real and what's performance anymore. I came into this arrangement desperate. How do I know that what I feel isn't just gratitude? And how do you know this doubt isn't just fear?" She had no answer for that. 4 weeks, she said finally. "We agreed to 10 weeks. Let's finish what we started. And when it's over, when there's no arrangement between us, ask me again. And if my feelings haven't changed, then I'll know they're real, and I'll have had time to understand my own." He studied her for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. 4 weeks. I'll wait." He lifted her hand to his lips. "But know this, I've never been more certain of anything. When this arrangement ends, I'm going to ask you to stay, and I'm going to hope, with everything I have, that you say yes." He released her hand and walked away, leaving her standing alone, her heart in turmoil and her walls crumbling around her. 4 weeks to determine if what she felt was love or delusion. It was going to be the longest 4 weeks of her life. The threat arrived on a Tuesday morning, disguised as a social call. Jessamine was taking breakfast alone. Theron had departed early for Parliament, when the butler announced that Lady Morrigan Stanhope had come to call. Before Jessamine could formulate a polite refusal, the woman herself swept into the morning room. "Miss Thorne, I do hope I'm not interrupting." "Lady Stanhope, what an unexpected pleasure." "I'm certain it is." Morrigan settled herself into a chair without waiting for invitation. "I've come to discuss a matter of some delicacy. I thought it best to speak with you privately before involving the Duke." Jessamine's stomach tightened. What matter would that be? The matter of your identity, or rather, your lack of one. Morrigan withdrew a folded paper from her reticule. "I've had investigators looking into your background, Miss Thorne. The minor gentry family you claim descent from. They don't exist. There's no record of any Thorne family matching your description anywhere in England." Jessamine kept her expression composed through sheer force of will. "Furthermore," Morrigan continued, clearly enjoying herself, "I've discovered that a seamstress named Jessamine Thorne was employed at Madame Orsolia's dress shop until approximately 7 weeks ago. A seamstress who disappeared the very night of the Duke's ball. She leaned forward. Quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say? What do you want, Lady Stanhope? Direct. I appreciate that. Morrigan tucked the paper away. What I want is simple. You will end this engagement immediately. You will leave London and never return. In exchange, I will keep what I've discovered to myself, and your precious Duke will be spared the humiliation of having been deceived by a common seamstress. And if I refuse, then I go to the papers. By tomorrow morning, all of London will know that the Duke of Aldercrest's fiancée is a fraud. His reputation will be destroyed. His political work will suffer. Morrigan's smile widened. You claim to care for him. Prove it. Leave before you ruin him. The ultimatum hung in the air, poisonous and inescapable. Everything Morrigan said was true. If exposed, Theron would suffer. But leaving now, without explanation, without giving him the chance to respond, that felt like its own betrayal. I need time to consider, Jessamine said finally. You have until tomorrow evening. After that, I go public. She departed, leaving Jessamine alone with the wreckage of everything she had built. Theron found her in the library that evening, sitting in darkness with her bags packed at her feet. Jessamine, he moved to light the lamps. What's happening? The servant said you've been asking about coach schedules. I have to leave. What? Why? She told him everything. Lady Stanhope's visit, the investigation, the ultimatum. With each word, she watched his expression shift from confusion to anger to something she couldn't quite identify. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. So your solution, he said slowly, is to run away in the middle of the night without telling me. I was going to leave a letter. A letter. His voice was flat. After everything we've shared, everything we've built, you were going to leave me a letter and disappear. I'm trying to protect you. By making decisions for me. By deciding what I can and cannot handle without consulting me. Theron crossed to her, his eyes blazing. Lady Stanhope has evidence that you're a seamstress. So what? I already know you're a seamstress. I've known from the beginning. But society doesn't know. Your reputation, my reputation will survive. I'm a duke with considerable wealth and political influence. A scandal might be uncomfortable, but it won't destroy me. He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his gaze. What would destroy me is losing you. Don't you understand that yet? Jessamine felt tears spilling down her cheeks. Theron, I have nothing to offer you. No family. No fortune. No standing. If you marry me, if I marry you, I'll have a partner who understands struggle and values substance over appearance. I'll have a wife who sees me as a person rather than a title. I'll have someone to share breakfast with who actually reads the papers and has opinions about them. His voice softened. I'll have you, Jessamine. That's all I've wanted for weeks now. Lady Stanhope will expose everything. Then let her. We'll face it together. Theron released her shoulders, taking her hands instead. Marry me, Jessamine. Not as part of an arrangement. Because I love you, and I believe, despite your best efforts to convince yourself otherwise, that you love me too. The words she had been holding back for weeks finally broke free. I do love you, she whispered. I've been terrified to admit it. Terrified it wasn't real. But I do. I love your kindness and your intelligence and your terrible morning disposition. I love how you pretend not to care about things you care about deeply. I love that you offered to help Madame Orsolya simply because it mattered to me. Then stay. Fight this with me. Yes. She met his eyes. I'll marry you. For real this time. His kiss was desperate and tender and absolutely honest. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Theron pressed his forehead to hers. "Tomorrow, we face Lady Stanhope together. My grandmother has been gathering information on the Stanhope family for years, waiting for exactly this sort of situation. Lady Morrigan has her own secrets. She'd prefer remain hidden. Mutually assured destruction? Strategic negotiation. There's a difference." He pulled her close. "Whatever happens, we face it together. No more running. No more letters. Promise me." "I promise." They stood together in the library, surrounded by books and shadows, two people who had begun as strangers in a lie and somehow found their way to truth. The confrontation with Lady Stanhope took place in Araminta's private sitting room, with all parties present. Jessamine sat beside Theron, their hands clasped, while the Dowager Duchess presided like a general surveying a battlefield. Lady Morrigan had arrived expecting surrender. She left, 20 minutes later, pale and silent. The details of Araminta's leverage remained private, but the result was clear. There would be no exposure, no scandal, and no public humiliation. Lady Stanhope would attend the wedding with a smile, offer her congratulations, and never speak of seamstresses or investigations again. "How did you know she had secrets worth hiding?" Jessamine asked afterward. Araminta's smile was serene. "Everyone has secrets, my dear. The trick is knowing which ones matter and when to use them." The wedding took place 3 weeks later, not in the grand cathedral Araminta had originally envisioned, but in the small chapel on the Aldercrest estate. 50 guests rather than 500. Flowers from the manor's own gardens, a ceremony that felt intimate rather than theatrical. Jessamine wore a gown she had helped design herself, incorporating her own skilled needlework into the delicate embroidery. It felt right, carrying her past into this new future. Theron waited at the altar, looking nervous in a way she had never seen before. When she reached him, he took her hands with visible relief. "I was afraid you'd change your mind," he murmured. "Never." The vows they exchanged were traditional, but they had written additional promises to share privately. His to her, to value her opinions, support her ambitions, and never let her feel invisible again. Hers to him, to challenge him honestly, stand beside him always, and remind him regularly that being a duke didn't exempt him from courtesy before his morning coffee. The vicar pronounced them married, and Theron kissed her with an enthusiasm that made several elderly guests fan themselves. At the wedding breakfast, Theron pulled her aside and pressed a folded document into her hands. "What's this?" "Open it." She unfolded the paper and found herself staring at property deeds. A building on a fashionable street in London. A shop. "I don't understand." "It's yours. Completely, legally, irrevocably yours. Not connected to our marriage, not dependent on me. Whether we're together for 50 years, or you decide tomorrow that you've made a terrible mistake, that shop belongs to you." Theron's expression was serious. "You entered into my grandmother's arrangement seeking independence. I want you to know that marrying me hasn't taken that away. The original compensation was meant to give you freedom. This ensures you'll always have it, regardless of what happens between us." Jessamine stared at him through tears. "You're giving me a dress shop. I'm giving you options, security, the knowledge that you chose me freely, not because you had no alternatives." She threw her arms around him, the deed crumpling between them. "I love you. Have I mentioned that today?" "Only 4 or 5 times. Feel free to continue." 4 years later, the nursery at Aldercrest Manor rang with chaos and laughter. Jessamine stood in the doorway, watching her husband attempt to negotiate with their 3-year-old daughter while simultaneously preventing their 1-year-old son from eating his wooden blocks. "Rosalind, We cannot bring the puppy to dinner. He doesn't have table manners. Neither does Papa, Rosalind observed with devastating accuracy. Jessamine laughed, drawing their attention. Rosalind immediately abandoned the puppy debate to launch herself at her mother, while baby Edmund waved his block triumphantly, as if he had won some important victory. "Mama, Papa says I can't bring Winston to dinner, but Winston will be lonely. Winston has his bed and his toys. He'll be fine for an hour." Jessamine scooped up her daughter. "And Papa is right." "Papa is occasionally right about things," Theron said dryly, rescuing Edmund before he could attempt to eat the block again, though his wife rarely admits it. I admit it when it's warranted. So never. "You're learning." They handed the children off to their nurse and made their way down to dinner, walking arm in arm through corridors that had become as familiar to Jessamine as her own heartbeat. "Letter from Lady Stanhope today," Theron mentioned. "She and her husband are relocating to the continent. Permanently, it seems." How sad for the continent. Araminta had ensured that Lady Stanhope's attempted blackmail became quietly known throughout society. Not the specifics, but enough to paint her as someone who trafficked in cruel manipulation. The social consequences had been swift. "I had a letter as well," Jessamine said over dinner, "from Madame Orsolia. The shop is thriving. She's taken on 3 new apprentices. Your recommendation helped. She knows the truth now about how I came to be a duchess." Jessamine smiled. "She says it's the most romantic thing she's ever heard." They retired to the library after dinner, still their favorite room, still where they spent their quiet evenings together. Jessamine settled into her chair while Theron reviewed correspondence. "Do you ever regret it?" Theron asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Any of it. Sometimes I wonder if you'd have been happier with a simpler life, your own shop, your own choices, without all the obligations." She set down her book and crossed to him, perching on the arm of his chair. "I have my own shop. I make my own choices. And the obligations aren't so terrible when I face them with you. But, Theron," she cupped his face, making him look at her. "I spent 23 years invisible, overlooked, dismissed. Then I got trapped behind a jammed door, and a scheming grandmother decided I was the solution to her problems. And somehow, I ended up with you. I don't regret a single moment. Not one." He pulled her down into his lap. "I love you, you know. Only 4 or 5 times today. You're slipping. I'll endeavor to do better." They sat together as the fire crackled and the night deepened. In the distance, Rosalind's voice rose in some new negotiation with her nurse, probably about the puppy again. Edmund was likely still attempting to eat things he shouldn't. But tonight, everything was exactly as it should be. Their story had begun with a ball and a midnight ultimatum, with scheming and desperation, and a door that refused to open. It had become a partnership, then a friendship, then something far deeper than either of them had anticipated. And Jessamine wouldn't change a single ridiculous, improbable moment of it. Not for anything in the world. Thank you for joining us on this journey of unexpected love and second chances. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, subscribe, and share it with fellow lovers of romantic tales. Your support keeps our storytelling corner alive and thriving. Stay tuned. Another emotional story awaits you. Click, listen, and let your heart be swept away once more.